So I want to start off with a little bit of a game. And yes, I use quotation marks for a reason there because I feel like games should be fun. And this might not be a super fun game, but it might elicit a little bit of childhood memories in you. I'm going to say a few phrases that many of us will recognize, whether they were said to you while you were growing up or they're just something that you widely knew about adults thinking about kids. I'll say the first half, and I'd love for you to try to finish the sentence for me. Children are meant to be seen and not heard. If you don't stop crying, I'll give you something to cry about. I brought you into this world and I can take you out. Most of these lines we might even laugh at now. But the fact that they're so similar, that familiar to us, that they're easy to recite says something. These sayings reflect ideas that were once widely accepted. Children are meant to be seen and not heard. Children should be observers and not contributors. If you don't stop crying, I'll give you something to cry about. Corporal punishment as the only means to discipline. I brought you into this world and I can take you out. Children are understood as property and not people. These ideas shaped generations, and they have created patterns that have existed for centuries in many cultures. But Jesus has a habit of flipping our assumptions. In the ancient world, including among the Israelites, children were generally viewed as low-level dependents. Some scholars even say that children are not real persons until they become adults. They're needing to be filled up. What my education degree calls tabula rasa, meaning blank slate, meaning that there needs to be knowledge filled into kids because they don't have any innate knowledge when they're born. So it's not surprising that when we find a story in the book of Matthew where people are bringing children to Jesus to be blessed, to be filled up. It's also not surprising that the disciples, when they see this moment happening, are trying to send these parents and families away. What is surprising is Jesus' response. In Matthew 19, 13-15, he says, "Then people brought little children to Jesus for him to place his hands on them and pray for them. But the disciples rebuked them. Jesus said, 'Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these.' When he had placed his hands on them, he went on from there." This passage often becomes a rallying cry for many children's ministries, and rightly so. It's a beautiful, direct quote from Jesus about kids, and it can be painted on a wall beautifully. But if we were to stop there, only ever seeing the script on the wall, we would miss its deep theological weight. Jesus isn't only affirming the worth of children, he's revealing something radical about God's kingdom. The kingdom belongs to such as these: the small, the overlooked, the ones with no social leverage. If we think back to our spiritual practice that we all experienced together, maybe we can recognize that idea of social leverage in a little bit of a different way. Those who've experienced barriers in life where they are starting their race multiple steps back from someone else. If Jesus says, "Let the children come to me," then we have to ask, where is Jesus found today? At the beginning of his ministry, Jesus makes it pretty clear in Luke 4, quoting Isaiah. He says, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the captives and recovery of sight for the blind, to release the oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." Jesus doesn't describe his mission on earth as a time to influence those who already have power and do that behind closed doors. He says his mission is towards the poor, the imprisoned, the oppressed, those who have experienced and continue to experience barriers. Around Southridge, we often talk about people on the margins, those outside the spaces where power and influence and comfort tend to gather, people whose lives have been shaped by hardship. Jesus doesn't treat people on the margins as a side project or something to come to when you have time. He makes it even more clear during his Sermon on the Mount. He says, "Blessed are those who are poor in spirit, those who mourn, the meek, the merciful, the peacekeepers, the persecuted," not as the people to recognize when you have that spare time. but as those who are the center of God's vision. This is where Jesus spends his life, among the marginalized. And if the children are called to come to Jesus, this is where we should also be heading. The question goes from, where can Jesus be found, to how can we accompany our children there? If you've been around Southridge for a while, you've probably heard us say the phrase, friendship makes the difference. We believe that the church is meant to be an intentional continuation of Jesus' life of love, experiencing and expressing this love. Not a service provider that can be consumed, but a community shaped by mutual and relational love. When we're in proximity to and in friendships with those on the margins of our society, we begin to be opened up to the realities and truths of the life that they live. When we are in these relationships, we also see the work of God breaking cycles of poverty and isolation and fear. And we believe and we have experienced that when we are in these types of relationships, our hearts are ever changing and becoming more like Jesus. We continue to learn that this core sentiment as we understand that God is love. He isn't just a message about love or a truth of love or a call to or a commandment to love. Although these things are true, in the truest sense though, it's that God in his full image is love. Even Jesus' own disciples needed to learn this, despite experiencing the life and miracles of Jesus day after day. When Jesus' disciples were in a boat and a massive storm comes, and Jesus calms the storm in one word, they ask, "Who is this?" They don't understand Jesus' power and connection to God. After the best of the best experience of discipleship with Jesus, where they've spent every single day with him, they've followed him everywhere that he's gone, where they've watched him heal, eaten with him, spoken with him, prayed with him, and had deep connection with him, the disciples were still at a who is this level faith. It isn't until Jesus invites them into this ministry with him that they begin to see his true identity. In Luke 9, it says, Jesus summoned the 12 and gave them power and authority, and he sent them out to proclaim the kingdom of God and to heal the sick. We see here that Jesus calls the 12 not just to see and hear, but to do. He calls them to do, to experience and express love. He calls them to walk in faith. Jesus' discipleship approach went from disciples being students to allowing them to be teachers, even if they weren't fully feeling like they were ready to do that yet. They stepped into experiential discipleship. They became love with skin on. And only then, after being part of Jesus' mission tangibly, when they were asked again who Jesus was, Peter said, God's Messiah. The reason we believe we are called to be missional, to live in relationship across societal barriers and boundaries, is because that is when we get to both experience and express Jesus' true character of love. So, we answered the question, where is Jesus found? Among the marginalized. How can we accompany our kids there? Through relationships with those on the margins. Now we have to ask, how can kids fit into this way of following Jesus? I concede that we haven't always thought about missional living with families in mind. But what we are learning and growing towards is recognizing that this is actually the gift that we can give our kids. A way of raising them that allows them to grow and experience and express Jesus' love instead of just hearing about it like a concept. Being part of a missional community is being in relationship with those who are different than each other. And sometimes that can feel scary or uncomfortable. And if that's where you're at, that is totally valid. Being in these types of spaces is not always easy, but I want to push you to see their importance. My mom always told me that growth never happens when you're comfortable. She mostly was probably talking about the intense growing pains that I had when I was about 11 years old, but I think that rings true to a life of faith as well. When we are uncomfortable, we need to lean on Jesus through that discomfort, and it helps us to untie those knots. At Southridge, we're learning to frame this journey through 3 movements: educate, expose, and equip. Educating kids, parents, and adults about God's love and the framework of love that Jesus displays. Sometimes that happens through a message kind of like this, or for our kids right now as they're learning in their own spaces together. Education also happens through our annual impact report. This shows the work that our church is doing and our anchor causes, which can be shared with our children to help them understand who we are as a church and who the church is. Or through our mission-minded day camp Activate, or our youth experiences like Yes Chef, where they went to Welland and cooked a meal learning about food insecurity. Or our recent Downtown Dash, where our youth walked through spaces downtown St. Catharines that many of our friends experiencing homelessness walk every day. Exposing our kids to spaces where they share space and laughter with those who are different than each other, who are experiencing marginalization in our community. In our Welland location, in response to food insecurity that many in our community face, we provide dinner every Friday night of the year. These meals are opportunities to share out of our abundance, a safe, warm place to eat. And it's also a place where we can model to our children how to share a table, how to ask questions, share a laugh with people who are different than each other. In our Vineland location, we began to dream about how the Sunday Caribbean Center that we've been offering with healthcare, legal support, and a free thrift shop for our farm worker community, we started to think about how could this be a place for our children as well. So we started opening up the gym. We had soccer and floor hockey and mini cricket, which is now part of what we call our Caribbean Canadian Center nights. This has transformed into a place where kids and their caregivers, alongside their migrant farm workers, can all enjoy games together. Sometimes it's a Jamaican farm worker friend helping a kid learn how to hold a cricket bat, or maybe it's some of our kids teaching our Trinidadian friends how to play hockey for the first time. In our St. Catharines location, we hold Christmas and Thanksgiving dinners, crokinole tournaments, or trivia nights. And these serve as opportunities for families and community members across different experiences to share a meal together or share stories across a game board, creating opportunities to get to know each other. This past Christmas, we had 350 people join in one room. Current residents, past residents, churchgoers, families, kids, community members. And beyond that, our youth were the ones who were serving. They were the ones who were giving out the food. They were the ones who were providing a space for kids to feel like they were part of something, with some coloring and craft activities being a part of it. It was a beautiful picture of God's kingdom in one place. And we often say about these events that if Jesus was in town on Christmas, that this is the dinner party that he would attend. Similarly, the opportunities that we have with our Becoming Good Relatives team to share meals with Indigenous communities here in Niagara and out at Six Nations all serve to expose our children to the lives of Indigenous neighbors. And then the third step in this journey, equipping. Equipping our children to better understand how this changes the way that we live each day. How we can learn to behave more like Jesus and grow closer to him. Some of these happen as we respond to these exposure experiences. We're able to ask our children questions on the drive home from each of these experiences, why we ate that meal away from our own table, and how this teaches us about Jesus. As our Welland location pastor Tom Lowen often says after he describes his monthly visits with his 2 young kids to Harvest Kitchen, he says that these moments, these experiences, are actually the best parenting that he does in a month. We invite you to lean into these opportunities for your children as well, equipping you with resources to equip them to an experiential journey of following Jesus, just like the disciples needed in order to really know who Jesus was. Taking our kids and ourselves from a who is this level faith to a always knowing for sure that Jesus is God's Messiah. And through it all, we are learning that each of our anchor causes are not barriers for our families and kids, but are able to be well supported in our community. but opportunities for this education, exposure, and equipping to be experienced. A chance for us to tangibly experience that these are the realities that some amongst us face each day. And our children should also know these things. But beyond that, that even in our differences, we are all children of God, made in the image of Jesus, with love to share with each other. We believe that these are the spaces that Jesus spent his time. And if Jesus invites his children to be with him, then we should probably go to where he can be found. As one of our pastors, Carrie Jones, has often said, this is the gift that we uniquely have here at Southridge for our kids and youth. This is what we have here for your kids, or how I like to say it because I don't have kids, our kids, or even our adults, our people. Research shows that for many who have grown up in the church, faith deconstruction often happens around the post-secondary education timeframe, when they become aware of social challenges that don't really align with the Jesus that they know and the church that they've experienced. When there is a misalignment of the way of Jesus, who is among those who mourn and are persecuted, and the church who puts up walls against those who mourn and who are persecuted. There's often a faith breakdown for our young people. As a missional church, we hope to expose our kids to these social challenges in the world, and we do that in the context of Jesus, addressing those challenges through and with Jesus so that there's never a disentanglement needed to happen, because their orientation of Christ is always towards the other rather than away from these challenges. So the last question that we must answer is it worth it? Of course it's worth it. Our kids' faith means so much to us. And if we can help them build their faith that sticks, we want to be a part of that. These opportunities are definitely worth the challenges. I want to share a trend that was going around this past year with parents. And they would say one of those old phrases that came from our game that we played at the beginning of this time together. But people filmed their kids actually saying the end of the sentence, what came to mind when they heard that first part of the sentence. So take a look at what one kid was recorded saying.
All right, just finish my sentences, okay?
Okay.
I'll give you something to
Lighten your day.
I brought you into this world and
I want you to live it to the fullest.
just wait until
I don't know about this one. I finish this and then we can play together.
Good. Okay. As long as you live under my roof,
You will be loved.
and children should be seen
And cared for.
Other answers that were shared among these thousands that were recorded were, I brought you into this world and I can keep you safe. Kids are meant to be loved. If you don't stop crying, I'll hug you. We get to establish these new patterns. We get to change the narrative, and it's already starting to change. To Jesus, church was never a building. It was an embodied love of God, people of all ages bringing love to life together. Our hope is that this is the vision of church that our kids will join in and grow into. A church where we share meals across different, learn about injustice without fear, and experience Jesus among those he loved. So, let's raise the next generation, not just in church, but as the church, and help our kids finish the sentences about church in a way that sounds way more like that video than how we played in our game at the beginning. And let's define church as a community that embodies Jesus, brings his love to life, and invites our children to know him and to be his love in the world. And now, as I close, I want to put my kids' ministry brain on. I want to give you a moment because in all the lessons that I get to teach our kids every week here, it begins with a big idea and it ends with that same big idea. That phrase that kids can go home and when parents inevitably ask, what did you do or what did you learn at church today, they can hopefully pull out of their back pocket and say to them. Something like, peacemakers reflect God's peace to the world. That's what our kids learned last week. Or maybe this morning our kids will hopefully be able to say, we can build peace when we are in relationship with others. But I don't think today for our adults there's one singular big idea. I think it's more of a spark of transformation, depending on where we find ourselves. For some of us, I hope today is a spark that lights something in you to make a new decision, to see people differently, to love others differently. Or maybe it's the smallest spark that just pushes you to sit somewhere different at church next week. Or come out to an event that you normally wouldn't attend. For some of us, I'm hoping this spark for ourselves is to come to Jesus and move closer to and experiencing and expressing his love in the way he did. And yes, today we also talked about kids specifically, wanting to let kids come to Jesus and experience and express his love in the same way we're invited into. But I think the thing we talked about and the spiritual practice we experienced is for all of us, even if we don't have kids. The goal today is for us to let the children of our community come to Jesus, together with all of us as we're also coming to Jesus, experiencing and expressing his love with people on the margins, together as the church. I truly believe that this message has a small spark, no matter where you are on your journey. You just have to take some time to recognize it. So I want to give you a silent moment to identify your takeaway for today, your spark, with the question, where is God leading you on your journey towards love today?